this is the time of the birth of Jesus, and but we're also going to go through some statistics about the condition of the church in America and why evangelism is so critical. I just got through putting on a 5-hour class on evangelism, so everybody missed out on that. Sorry you missed out, but if you're real nice, I'll do it again next year. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it's just so important. What's happening all over the world. We were talking about Bethlehem and Israel and Islam is creeping in, and other religions and even non-religious people are growing significantly, and that in itself is a religion. Not believing in God is believing in self. Which can become a god. So anyhow, we're going to look at a few graphs and and discuss the dying church. There was a few years ago, there was a movie that came out, God's Not Dead. And so, people are asking, is God dead? And over the last 18, 19 years of my travels around the world, this is the condition, not just in America, but all over the world, especially in Europe, and in different countries that we've gone to. Now, in Kenya, there's a church on every corner, but they open and then they close down, so it's just like America, and in essence. And so, what does God want? Does he want the church to die? Of course not. So what is it that we can do to ensure that doesn't happen? So I've got a few graphs and statistics. There was a man who made the claim that Christianity is always one generation from extinction. And Ronald Reagan actually coined the phrase that capitalism, or democracy, is always one generation from extinction. And if these principles are not taught, then of course, the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so we have had several generations of kids who don't know any better. They don't know any better. In Proverbs chapter 30, this was written 700 years before Christ. This is about when Solomon. Actually, this particular proverb was written by another gentleman, but approximately 700 years. But in Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 11 through 14, the writer here, Agur, he says, there is a generation that curses their father and does not bless their mother. There's a generation that are pure in their own eyes and is not washed from their filthiness. Now remember, this was 2,700 years ago. There's a generation, verse 13, how lofty are their eyes, and their eyelids are lifted up. There's a generation whose teeth are as swords, and their jaw teeth as knives, to devour the poor from off the earth and the needy from among men. So the Bible talks about this. And what is the future? Well, the future is in young people. One time we were young people and we were the future. We are going to die. And so what is the future? What is the future of America? And there's a picture here of people trying to save the church, from collapsing. And so, we have to get back to biblical evangelism and make that a lifestyle, in our life. And in order for the church to not just, remain, because that's not enough, but God wants it to grow. He wants his church to thrive and to be healthy. And Jesus used the example that, the kingdom of God is like a woman who took a little leaven and put it into 3 measures of meal. until the whole was leavened. And so that means that, that leaven, which is yeast, it never stops working. What it does is it influences the entire. One measure of meal is like 5 gallons of flour. So that's 15 gallons of flour. You put a little bit of yeast in it, and that yeast never stops working until all 15 gallons have become influenced by it. And that's what Christianity is supposed to be. And, in our travels, we've seen, churches empty everywhere. And I'm going to show you some statistics on this. This is why we only sang one song, because I have a few slides today. So the single fastest decreasing religion globally is Christianity. The largest net loss in numbers due to conversions, losing millions to unaffiliation and other faiths. So in other words, Christianity has lost more than they have gained. And they lost it to unaffiliation. Does anybody know what that word means?
World, basically.
In other words, I don't want to be affiliated with Christianity. I've had a taste of it. I don't like it, And these are not people who have necessarily fallen away, but these are people who were converted, and a conversion is, or someone who's converted, and that's kind of what's happened, is people have been converted, but they've never been discipled. They don't have those deep roots. So Buddhism has also significant net losses. People have tried that and realized there's nothing there. Also, alongside overall declines in traditional Western religions like Christianity and Judaism, with a significant global trend towards religious unaffiliation, atheists, agnostics, or the nuns. They actually have a name now. They're the nuns. Not the NUNs in the Catholic Church, but the nuns. And what's amazing is this is the largest growing religion, is the atheist, agnostics, or the nuns. That's the fastest growing religion globally. In Europe, I mean, it's literally like down to less than 10%, or in certain parts of Europe, some parts like Germany, it's like 2% out of the entirety of the country is Christian. And so this is a major concern. These are some statistics that you can do a search. So annual closures, the estimates suggest between 4,000 to 10,000 churches close every year, and they have projected that about 15,000 will close this year alone. And guess what? What day is it of 2025? We're getting ready to end this year. This year is over. It's done. So we don't know what the actual results are going to be. So opening versus closing, the ratio, really can't tell. A lot of people don't report this kind of stuff, but about 3,000 new church plants versus 4,500 closures. This is back in 2019. So, that's, we all know that if you have $3,000 in the bank and you spend $4,500, what do you have in the bank? So long-term projections, a lot of experts are predicting up to 100,000 U.S. churches could close by 2050. And a third potentially, what they say is on the brink, not healthy. So denominational impact, Southern Baptist Convention saw 77% of its congregations disband or close in recent periods. These are real statistics, okay? And some of them are, like you see this one, 2019, they don't even have anything, the pandemic affected this big time. So the rise of the nuns, a surge in people with no religious affiliation, especially millennials and Gen Z. It's a major, these are our younger people. So what they have said is these younger people are saying they don't have an ability to adapt. Many churches struggle to attract younger members, preferring tradition over necessary change. Now, these are statistics that are put out there, by all of these research people. We have to have tradition. We can't get away from, our traditional faith and religion. And so, but what's happened is that, parents no longer teach their children. The school system and the world is now the teachers of children. They raise kids, and the world has nothing to do with the church. And so when kids come into the church, there's nothing for them. Why? Because they've been taught, tradition, and like the old saying is it's easy to get born again and say a prayer and say I'll follow Christ, but church is a habit. It has to be developed. It's a habit. Coming to church has to become a habit. And so the underlying disillusionment is what they say. People are leaving due to, in other words, just come to church and everything is going to be okay. They're disillusioned. That's not true. It's just like our whole life we've been taught that a good God would never send you to hell, right? So people are disillusioned. Also, they're neglected. There's all these mega churches, and I don't have anything against mega churches, but people get lost in the shuffle. Just like over the last 50 to 75 years, there have been generations of kids that were lost in the shuffle. And so these are real statistics. They've actually gone out. Why did you leave the church? Talking about young people. And, young people are truthful about it. Why don't they want anything to do with the church? Well, because, they never had that. Remember the old proverb, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he shall not depart from it. Well, that's also true. If you train your child to live like a devil, then they won't depart from that. So it goes both ways, either good or bad. But these are the realities. Now, the one thing that they haven't factored in is God and what God is able to do. But statistics show that there has been a huge shift, and these are incidents talking about violence against Christianity. And there was in 2003 485, and in 2024 they say 415. But I don't know if anybody's been watching the news, but the police chief of Washington D.C. has resigned. Has anybody seen the news? Because she was cooking the books. In other words, she was lying about real incidents happening in Washington, D.C., and come to find out that President Trump bringing the National Guard in was the only saving measure that saved it. And so they have discovered that she was lying through her teeth. Well, if you notice, who was in office during these years right here? So we know that a lot of fake statistics. And so I guarantee you the statistics are higher with persecution in the church. In 2018, there were only 50 across the nation. And, I can only imagine what it's going to be in 2025. So guess what? You know what? There's Christians they're not going to die for their faith. If somebody, we all remember as kids, I'm sure, we heard the story. What would happen if, people in masks come in with AK-47s and said, deny Jesus or else, we all heard those stories. Well, that's a reality now. That's a reality now. And so a lot of churches are going to close because of that, because they're afraid. Percent of U.S. adults that identify as Christian back in 2007, and of course we know the difference between identifying as and real faith, but still 78% And as of 2024, they say it's about 63% versus the lower line, it has steadily increased. It went from 16% all the way up to 28%. And so, we see Christianity declining and atheism going up higher. I don't know if you can see this very well. So the top blue line, okay, in 2000, it was 30% of Christians who attended church weekly. And if you notice, that has declined all the way down to 20% in 2022. The yellow line is percent of people who never attended. You see which way that's going? Okay. So it was about 12% in 2000, and in 2022, it's 32%. And then the light blue line are people who attended about once a month. It hasn't really changed over the years. So, statistics can help us identify some things, what's going on. Why is the weekly attendance going down? Why? Why are the people who never went to church, never attend, going up? So these are just things to evaluate, look at. So the religious composition in each generation, this was in 2024. So the dark blue are Protestant religion. The orange is Catholic, and the green is other world religions. But in 2024, Protestant Christians, we're talking about adults, 47% of them were silent. The baby boomers, who's a baby boomer? 42% of them were silent. Who's Generation X? I don't even know who these people are, but anyhow. So I guess that's us, right? Usins. So 35% of them were silent. Hold on a minute. I think I'm getting this wrong. Hold on a second. Oh yeah. So if you look at the top line, silent in their faith. Okay, 47% overwhelmingly Christianity is silent. 22% of Catholics were silent. 8% of other world religions were silent. Okay, so in other words, overwhelmingly all other religions in 2024 were not quiet, but Christianity was. So in other words, if you to kind of give you an example of how this looks, the younger you get, the less silent they are. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, up here are the older people. They're more silent until you get into other faiths. And as you come down, people get younger, okay? So right now, Generation Z, only 22% of the young people are silent about their faith, but yet 47% of older people are silent about their faith. So what does that tell you? It tells us those are the people that we need to recruit. Those are the people we got to talk to because they are not silent about their faith. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Oh, come on. Okay, so the importance of faith has dropped 20 percentage points since 2000, more than any other Christian commitment measure. Practicing Christians have declined from 46% to 24% of U.S. adults over the past 25 years. Only 1 in 3 Christians says that they strongly feel a responsibility to share their faith. Can you imagine? Only 33%. But guess what? This actually lines up with what Jesus said about the parable of the sower. If you look at statistics, only 25% in the parable of the sower are actually going to go to heaven. 25% actually share their faith. So only 1 in 3 say, anyhow. So this is a long-term downward trend that only recently has stabilized. God is not going to let it die. Okay. He's not going to let it die. And that's the good news. But God is going to use people who are willing to be who they say that they are, be Christians. And that means we have to step out in faith. This is an issue. And I hope that, I'm sure all of you know this, over the district, the Wesleyan district, there's 69 churches in the district, and many of them are on that edge, right? Let's see here. Is this going to go? Okay. So half of U.S. adults now are non-practicing Christians. I don't know if you can see this chart. Can you see the numbers? Okay. So the light blue line is actually increasing. Okay, and that is non-practicing Christians. In 2000, it was 37%, and now in 2025, 48%. Half of Christians are non-practicing Christians, which, according to the Bible, what would you call that? What would you call a non-practicing Christian? And what happens to them? And so from 2000, 46%. Now that's even horrible. Half of Christians actually exercise their faith and share their faith. But now in 2025, it's gone down to 24%. And this is across the board, and the state of the church right now is in the, in the where the word was sown amongst the thorns, right? Most Christians are more engulfed into the world than they are into the gospel. So I say all of that to say, okay, what is this teaching? It's biblical evangelism. Okay. Does anybody know who this guy is? Who can tell me who this guy associates with? Okay, this guy, what color is his beard? This is an imam. Okay. This is a Islamic man teacher. He's like a pastor. Okay. And so he, so the question is, first of all, God so loved the world that he gave his only son to who? To who? Everybody, right? So how do you approach this man and explain the salvation of God? Does anybody know how many of these guys are in America right now? So I'm just going to tell you that I'm going to tell you how merciful God is, because most Christians will never go anywhere else but America. God sent the world to America to give the church one last chance. The entire earth is right now here in American soil. Every country in the world is here, and 60% of them are in Seymour. These people are here, okay? And we saw the statistics. These people here are not afraid to share their faith. But Christians are. The ones who God says, do not fear, be strong, be bold, be of good courage. That's who these people are. They've come to America because they saw America as an opportunity to evangelize for their faith. It was ripe for the harvest. Well, you know who these people descend from? Abraham. They are the brother of Isaac. They are our brothers. Does this guy need Jesus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who has Jesus in here?
We do.
Okay, then all you got to do is give it to him. You know, I put this presentation together back in about 2020. Okay, and what you see right here was not a reality yet in America. But in 5 years, what do you see all over the streets? Protests. Okay. So here's the here. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to, you know what a radical jihadist is? Anybody? You know what jihad is? It's, yeah, they're serving God. And the reason they want to kill us is because we're not. That's what they think. You know, these people pray 7 times a day. And, you know, if you go to Israel or any other country in the world, you know, in Kenya, these Islamic drivers, they're driving the bus. Well, at a certain time, the bus stops. And they get out on the side of the road and traffic stops. And they go out and they get down and bow down to the east and pray to, you know, the sun god or Allah. But these people are radical about their faith. They are leavening. You know, they are radical. Muslim women, you know, you thought you would never see this in America, but yet it's here. Here it is. So how do you approach these people? How do you go up and talk to a person like this? You know they need Jesus. I'm going to tell you something. Most of the church has no clue what they're going to face out there. They have no clue. And you would be shocked at what you would uncover in some secret places, right? Even here in Seymour. You would be shocked. But the only way to overcome this is through the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is how we overcome. We don't war or fight after flesh and blood, but this is a spiritual battle. And these people here would make the best Christians you've ever seen. You couldn't stop these people. They ever get on fire for Jesus, it's over, man. I mean, it's kind of like me. I was kidding with you. You know, this used to not be something that you would see in America. Now it's almost everyday news. Terrorists are killing everybody. You hear it on the news, you see it. How, you know, you used to never see dead people laying all over the street, and now it's all over the news. It's everywhere. It's a normal, everyday part of life, and yet we saw the statistics while all of this is going on. The church, the mouthpiece of God, has been shut by the church. And you know, the one on the left is in Sudan. The one on the right is in Haiti. I know you all have seen news, and gangbangers took over Cap-Haitian and completely took over the street, the entire country, and it's still going on, you know, killing people and burning people. I mean, it's lawlessness, complete lawlessness, but yet we see it right here in America, all over our streets. You say, well, what does this have to do with the birth of Jesus, right? Well, it has everything to do with the birth of Jesus. You know, these people right here are real, okay? And they grew up without Jesus. This is what the world taught them to do. So how are we going to change this world? You know, the lower right-hand section there, that machete right there, everybody in Kenya has one of those. And they walk around, and I mean, they kill people all the time. And the church is going to have to get a backbone, and the church is going to have to rise up, and we're going to have to stand. Otherwise, this country, I believe, is real close to a civil war. Because I'm going to tell you something. There's some backwoods country folks that ain't Christian that are getting ready not to put up with all of this stuff that's going on. And if that happens, then boy, the Lord have mercy on the church. And I'm pointing the finger at myself because everywhere we go, we've got to take this thing seriously. God is serious. We are at a pivotal moment in history, and especially in America. And I think the church is looking to one man, a president, and hopefully Congress can do something. That's not going to change, what's going on in the streets. Youth in gangs. How do you walk up and talk to somebody that is, you see these kids there on the right with these guns in their hand? This is a reality all over America. This is a reality. These young kids, Satan is discipling people. Satan is discipling kids because the church isn't. And we've got to save these people. We got to get out there, and there has to be a rally of God's people rise up to take America back. And it starts right here. And I'm preaching to the choir here, and some of you say, well, I'm too old and I can't do. No, we're never too old to do anything. Where does it say all things are impossible? No. God can do more with less than he can with a lot. And so when it comes to the Seymour First Wesleyan Church, God wants the lost to come in here. God wants lost people to get saved. And the only way that that's going to happen is if someone shares their faith with them. And we can't give something away that we don't have. I mean, I'm showing you some pictures of people you never thought you might actually talk to, but drugs, kids are and here in Indiana, it's horrible. It's horrible all over. This is why the administration is cracking down on all of this, because hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Millions and millions of kids are hooked on this stuff. And it's not their fault. It's really not. This is the world system, and they're blinded, and they don't have any parental control. There's no boundaries in life. They could just, right now, Florida and a couple of other states are actually looking to, they realize how deadly and detrimental social media is to children, and parents give their kids the phone, and they can take it to school with them, and they live by it, and they have it in their hand, and that it's promoted. But Florida is getting ready to ban social media because it is killing kids. Kids are being raped, abused, kidnapped, entrapped, and pimped out. And we cannot be the church that hides our eyes from the truth of what's going on. This is a reality. Most states have legalized marijuana. And you know how they did it? They didn't do it by executive order. The people voted for it. Why? Because they don't have a contrast. They don't have anything to guide them, because the church is not out there mixed in with the government and mixed in with society for a balance between black and white, between darkness and light, between a lie and a truth. And the church is going to have to overall rise up and start talking. You know, we see these sanctuary cities, and now this is legal. They encourage people to come. And you know, the overall goal is, you know what the elite objective is behind all this? There's too many people in the world. They need to die. It's depopulation. But we are the people that bring life, and we cannot stand by and allow these things to happen. And you know what the missing ingredient to church growth is? Thank you. Persecution. And you know how you're going to be persecuted? If you start preaching, I promise you, you're going to get persecuted. Homelessness is rampant. It used to be a crime. Does anybody remember vagrancy? There used to be laws in the books. This is an issue. It is so horrible. I've been to these camps. We've fed people, and these people are completely demonized. They are completely taken over and controlled, and they can't get out. They need deliverance. They cannot get out of their situation. They are so far gone, they can't leave. And, you know, we look at it through a television box, and then we, and it leads to all kinds of other things. You know, back in 2012, I was in Colorado Springs, and I was doing outreaches in Manitou Springs, which is one of the most horrible places in Colorado. But anyhow, while I was in Bible college, let's see, where is my deal here? I was going there, and there was little kids like this one you see wearing a rainbow shirt. Their parents raised them up this way. Right now we have a couple of generations of kids. This is how they were raised. This was what they were trained to do. And that's what they believe. And of course, you know, when you entertain stuff like that, then kids become demon possessed. Those spirits, you know, that's why God told Israel, whenever you go into a city or whatever, you kill all of their donkeys, you kill all of their camels, you kill their dogs, you kill everything. You take every single idol and you burn it, because there were spirits in that. And the spirit of an animal will take on the nature of the owner. A child will take on the spirit of their parent. This is demonic, what's happening, and America needs deliverance. And people are so confused, and you know what? They're trapped into a philosophy, into a way of thinking that they have been taught that this is the way that it is. And they need, how do you approach people like this? How do you get into their mind? How can you change their will? I mean, it's going to take the power of God. It's going to take courage, but it's going to take the church taking that step forward and approaching that person in love. Because that person, there are many, many devils out there that know what they're doing, but there are millions of people who don't know. They're trapped in a lie of what they've been told. Homosexuality, prostitution, it's rampant. I mean, we're living in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, and America is fueling it. America is the number one sex trafficking country in America. America pays to have little kids kidnapped and come over here and abused. Americans pay for this. Americans pay big money for all kinds of internet sex. How do we go and share our faith with these people? You know, it's kind of like a wound. If you don't treat the wound when it needs to be treated, then it's just going to get worse. And after a while, it's going to get infected. And if you don't treat it and clean it out, then it's going to grow. And so instead of losing a finger, now you're going to lose an arm. And if you don't take care of that, then you're going to actually die. And that's exactly what's happening to America and the church, because the church is full of people who actually believe a lot of this stuff. And I'm not saying it here, but I'm talking about the church overall. Everywhere that we go, people are just so deceived. They don't know what to believe. The people in the church need to be evangelized, because people don't have that deep rooted discipleship, and they don't read the Bible. They don't know God. They don't know, and Christians are not vocal and sharing their faith everywhere that they go. And because of that, then the church even gets involved in the world. And now we have gay pride marches and churches, and church members are a part of the process now. And some of you look at me like, you got to be kidding me. But this is back in, see, when did I come to? Well, when I was in Colorado Springs in 2012, there was churches that had rainbow flags, and where the Presbyterian Church had ordained, homosexual pastors, and now these people are out marching. I mean, so we looked at some statistics of people who have become nuns. So some of these churches, that's what they claim. It's none. I don't have any really, in other words, I don't want to have anything to do with Christianity, because it's not a part of the world. How could God, a loving God, send someone to hell? After all, we're just human, right? Police and politics. We see this every single day in the news. This was something that, I put together back in 2019, 2020. And these were just things that you saw overseas, but now this is in America. And how do you go and share your faith with these people? If you watch the news, if you see what's on YouTube, there's nothing but filth and foul and hatred. Just shouting, yelling. It's just absolutely demonic. How can we turn this thing around? Well, Jesus is coming back soon. That's not going to cut it. We have a responsibility to change people's lives, and that means somebody's going to have to stand up, and we're going to have to say, that's not right. It's not right what you're doing. Law or disorder. Right now, our political parties oppose each other. In fact, we don't even have a Democrat Party anymore. We have left-wing radicals. They have completely moved all the way over to the other end of the pendulum. There's no conservative or moderate Democrats anymore. President John F. Kennedy would be considered a radical right-wing Republican in today's age. You know, we've got police officers who right now more police are killing people at a higher rate than ever have before. And then you got people saying defund the police, and you know, police officers, even a lot of police officers are completely out of control because they've never been taught right from wrong. They were those, came out of the same school. The devils and the gangs and the drug addicts were all in the same class as some of them became police officers. They all the same became judges. They all came out of the same school system. They all came out of the same system. And so even though some of them are on the right side of the law, they don't understand the Constitution. And so even though we need them, we got to have police. But we are at a turning point and a dividing point, and 2026 is one of the most crucial years in history. You know, hopefully this lady on the top, hopefully, is about to get deported. Does anybody know who she is? What's her name? Ilhan Omar. And she is a radical Islamic terrorist in Congress. She came from Somalia, and they have found out, finally, thank God, that she committed fraud, and hopefully they'll deport her. And it was through her that people, Somalians in Minnesota, defrauded Americans out of $8 billion in welfare, and they sent it to al-Shabaab terrorists in Somalia, all under, you know, these people at the top up there. So, you know, how do you share your faith with these people? We have a responsibility to teach all nations. All nations. Everybody on the earth. How do you go to the poor and tell them about a God who loves them and he wants to save them, but right across the street is absolute prosperity? You know, what is it that we can give them that's going to cause them to follow Christ? And they have to stay in their condition. Or if we walk across the street, how do we tell those that are living like this to follow Christ? And he says to become poor. You know, this is the reality in most of the world right here. But we also have the opposite side of the spectrum. And these people also need Jesus. So how do you get into a poor man's mind and into his world? How do you get into a rich man's world? We're called to go into all of the world, no matter if it's rich, poor, in between, violent, peaceful, it doesn't matter. We're called to attack it with the gospel, to occupy. There's cultural barriers, you know, but we sing a song. Red and yellow, black and white, they're all precious in God's sight. And it doesn't matter what language they speak. It doesn't matter what culture they're from, what they're wearing, or if they got something on their face. It doesn't matter. They need Jesus. They need Jesus Christ. We all, if you cut us open, everybody's the same color. Red. Blood red. And everybody one day is going to die. You know, right now, our entire America, you know, Joe Biden spent 4 years and hundreds of billions of our tax dollars to implement and promote this DEI and gender equality and critical race theory over the entire earth, not just here in America, but over the entire earth. He opened the earth's mouth and then he crammed it into their throat and said, I don't care if you want it or not. You're gonna have it. And then what did the church do? For years, every month in July or June, Gay pride marches all over the United States. And where was the church? A lot of the church was actually there on the streets with them. The church has been silent, and we all know the saying, the only way for evil to prevail is what? How come we can finish that sentence? It doesn't matter. This is the new way of thinking in America right here. This is the new way of thinking. It is an ideology, it's a philosophy, just like Christianity is an ideology, it's a philosophy. And so how did America turn this way? They were taught line by line, line by line. How is America going to get turned back? It's a simple format that Jesus said, go and make disciples. Make disciples. So how do we do that? I would encourage, it's just kind of a picture of a globe with all different faces from all over the world. And all of those faces are right now, they're here in America. They're here. And we have got to have orders from the Lord. And, they're the same as when he left 2,000 years ago. But we need to find people that will sit down and be discipled. Each one of us need to be making disciples. And then, we also have a responsibility to the other churches. How do you share your faith with these people? They claim to be on our side. All are welcome. But, the devil ain't welcome. Jesus, a lot of times he went into the synagogue and the first person he cast out was the devil. The devil was there. So everybody's not welcome. And there has to be a dividing line. And, this is a serious issue. This is the church's representation of God and Christianity. And this is what we're up against and dealing with. A couple more slides. We are required to rebuke, reprove, and exhort. If you notice up here, this is the Glendale United Methodist Church. Do you know where the Methodist Church came out of? The Wesleyan Church. You are loved just as you are. God is love. Is that true? It is true. Okay. But what's their symbol up there? They've gone crazy with this flag. It's a rainbow flag, but they've added some different colors to it. They're gonna go all the way. How do we? When we were in Kansas, we were talking to a guy who was a Sunday school teacher in the Methodist Church, and he was teaching that. Remember what he was teaching? He was teaching that, God is, we don't know, man, woman, it could be both, we're not sure. And he was teaching adult Sunday school class about evolution, about that, some people are born homosexuals, that's who God created them to be, and just absolute confusion. And this guy was a nice guy. He was a nice guy. He didn't hate God. He's just lost. He's confused. These people are in confusion. They have no clue where they're going. What and Jesus said, "Be not deceived. Many shall come in my name." You know what he meant by that? The Lord revealed to me what that actually means. He said, it doesn't mean that somebody's going to stand up there and say, I am the Christ. But what they're going to do is they're going to tell you about another Jesus. And, listen, how could a good God send anybody to hell? After all, you're only human, right? That's another Jesus. And The first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. You will not make any image of any type of a God. And when people come and they start preaching a different type of a Jesus, then that can become an image in our mind. And he says, thou shalt not bow down or worship it. That means we can start obeying thoughts in our mind about another Jesus. And that becomes an idol. You know, we got all of these different United Church of Christ, no matter what. Jesus didn't reject people. Neither do we. You know, these are true statements, but the thing is, and he died for every one of us. But, you know, what is the balance? What is the truth? And these people, these are church people. And look, they're going out there. They're marching for their faith. So we're called to change the culture. We're commanded to occupy and influence the world for Jesus. And the Lord has given his orders. So how do we react? How can you share your faith with these people who just destroyed a police car? I've only shared just a little snippet. But this is what's out there. And, you know, it's not, you know, the nice little elderly ladies that you see at the store walking across the street, but these are real people